Oh, darn. Looks like Kris ate all that pie. Dang. I mean, that is their knife after all. Pretty self-incriminating, huh, Kris? After a long night, huh? Gee, I guess you really spent a long time eating that pie, right? Gosh, Kris even sleeping throughout the whole class. Whoopsie-daisy. It seems like eating all of that pie was a very hard and taxing exercise that took a lot of energy out of Kris, huh? 'Cause that's all that Kris did, right? 'Cause that's definitely the only thing they did last night. Oh hey, the TV is now plugged in. Gee, I wonder what that's for. Howdy, Dante here. This is part 2 of a 2-part analysis on Ralsei as a character. Watch part 1 before you watch this one. K thinks bye. Anyway, after Kris slept through the whole class like a corpse, Susie drags us into the Dark World closet, and we and Ralsei reunite. But Castletown is a bit empty, so Ralsei asks us to go to the classroom next to the closet. You'd think I'd point this as proof or something, but honestly, not really. I think Darkners are just aware of locations like the classroom and the computer lab. Plus, there is a door between the storage closet and the abandoned classroom, so it's not really rocket science. But after being very normal about our stuff, we bring everything to the storage closet. Now my Castletown is bustling with life. A shop, a bakery, a cafe, a club, the 4 essentials of a functioning economy. A nice little town. I truly do wonder what this town will be like after 5 more chapters. Ralsei? Come here. Please? No, I'm not mad. I'm not mad. Just have a seat, please. What the fuck is this? So, the town's name is based on the name I input, and the name I use as a save file. It's funny, honestly. In any other game, this wouldn't even cause people to bat an eye, but the fact that this is a game made by Toby Fox, who uses game mechanics like this as part of the story, is all the more reason to pay attention to this. Someone told the Sarudin the town's name, and there are only 2 people I can think of that would know that, and for the sake of my own sanity, I will assume that they got it from Ralsei. So, Ralsei, quick question, how the fuck do you know this? Every other instance of him name-dropping a mechanic can be chalked up as simply knowing how the world works. This, though? This is too specific. Why does he know this? How does he know this? One of the answers I can come up with is, due to the save points, can he just check and see who is saving? His knowledge is only limited to 1 save file, as mentioned before. He doesn't really know what the player has done through multiple playthroughs. He just knows the actions he needs to make and when. Unfortunately, we do have a school project we need to work on, and we should go to the library for that. Alright, I'll deal with it. I ain't done with you. So, we drop by the library and walk over to the computer lab. Ah, I see what you did there. While we have computer at home, Kris and Susie jump in. We find Noelle and meet Queen, and we are forced to fight. You sense a sudden presence, huh? The timing is weirdly specific, but I'll believe your story. For now. For the sake of brevity, I'm gonna try to skip over a bunch, but I will pop in and add in comments such as, to help us out, Ralsei activates magical stool form arm to help Kris reach the controls. actively choosing putting himself down to help us play the video game. We succeed, because we are such awesome gamers. We go around town and play funny letters game, getting Twitter blue while we are at it. We are, however, stopped by the revolution. We try to beat them because they think we are on the side of evil, but no matter how much we dance, they realize our vibes are whack and attempt to beat us with hammers, so we just keep dancing. And dancing, and dancing, and dancing, and dancing. Okay, good. They are gone. Susie helped us out, and that boss fight is over. Good. Now, Susie, what the fuck did you just do? Susie, quite literally, just made a fucking game mechanic out of thin air. I mean, she took what Kris did and ultimately made it her own thing, but that's the thing. Susie has made a point that she just does not follow the rules. She is actively avoiding being trapped into the strict code of conduct, saying fuck that and doing her own thing. Susie learning healing magic is a great character moment. I can concur with that. This, though, she's just made a point of not following the game. There is more about this to talk about. But for now, what was supposed to be Kris's thing, our thing, well, it's still our thing. We still ask her to do things, and she still at least does that. I think that it does go to show that this game isn't just static and solid. The game's fundamentals change based on characters' interaction. But we already knew that, did we? For now, though, let's not think about that, cause we got a chicken to defenestrate. Alright, so after Ralsei heals Susie with the power of friendship, he activates the mandatory choice cutscene for us to choose which character to go with, but Susie decides she doesn't want to make Kris make all the choices and chooses for us. Part of me wonders about this section, and what the game was supposed to be like. Not the game that Toby is making. I'm talking about the game that Deltarune was supposed to be. The Deltarune that Ralsei thinks he is a part of. 'Cause what if we could make that choice and go with Ralsei? Maybe we could have never encountered Noelle, or if we did, Ralsei could have at least prevented her from activating a few spells. But that doesn't happen. Susie made that choice for us. A first of many sequence breaks that soon start to pile up. But we aren't talking about that. Let's have some tea. Oh hey, they give some differing results depending on who drinks what. Gee, I wonder what that's all about. Yo, look at this dude. What's that? Yes, of course I will install Kanoto Pet. Step 1, delete System 32. You got it, boss. Anyway, we return to Ralsei and Susie, and she now learns a healing spell. if my assumption is correct, if we could have chosen a different path, then I think Susie would have never been able to learn the healing spell. I guess some sequence breaks are for the best. But right now, Queen is putting people into cages and forgot about him, and he was made into one of Queen's butlers. But yeah, Susie tried to heal Lancer, who's suffering from being in the wrong Dark World syndrome, and he turns to stone. Ralsei tells us that this is because each Dark World is personalized for a specific theming. Because he doesn't fit, he isn't compatible. I've said this before that Ralsei conceals things and information, but this? I think he's actually being honest with this. And it actually does make sense. Why? Okay, I'm now gonna step away from it and just give you something of a headcanon. Well, I mean, this whole video is my headcanon analysis, but this is fully my headcanon. First, let's talk about some ground rules. What do we know about Dark Worlds? Answer? Absolutely nothing. We know about theming and fountains and a sort of logic, but other than that, we don't know how Dark Worlds work. The fact that there is an entire world inside a small room breaks any of our preconceived laws of spatial placement. This is why I don't like how people bring up Birdly and Noelle sitting. The fundamental fact is that we just don't know how Dark Worlds work, why they work, or how they function with the logic of the world. It's literally magic, you guys. But magic follows a logic. So, let's talk about what I like to call Dante's Dark World Fountain Spectrum headcanon. Okay, so, how do I think Dark Worlds work? Well, let's assume this isn't just darkness. This is advanced darkness. Photons reading negative. So, how does its inverse, light, work? Well, light, or white light specifically, is a combination of all colors. Red, green, and blue are all light used for pixels on the computer screen that you're watching on, but that's because you can make any color out of those three colors, but once you combine all colors, you get white light. So, let's say the darkness in Deltarune works the same in some extent. Castletown's Dark Fountain is pure darkness. It has all of the dark colors. However, Card Castle Dark Fountain is, let's say, blue. All the denizens of Card Castle are tinted blues, so Lancer would be able to survive there. However, in Cyber City, the Dark Fountain is green, so while Queen and the denizens would be able to live there, Lancer wouldn't be because his darkness doesn't fit for them, so he would just turn to stone. In other words, colorless. But once they are at Castletown, everything is fine, because that's pure darkness. It has blue and green and red and orange and yellow and purple and so on. Why am I talking about this? No reason. It's just something that I've had in the back of my head for a while. It's definitely not this deep, but I like thinking about things, so I made this. But the point is that when Ralsei says this, I do fundamentally believe that he is being honest. But like I said, this is just my headcanon, because, in reality, we don't know how Dark Worlds work. Remember that. Because right now, I've got a game to play. I mean, I've heard of antivirus, but this is ridiculous! Sorry. That was disrespectful. I just needed something to cut the tension. I'm sorry, it's just everything about him, it's just a tragedy through and through, and the sheer desperation he felt, the absolute depths he fell to. I know you all really want me to talk about this dialogue, and I will. Just not now. I know, I keep bringing something up and just not talking about it, only to do so at a later moment. I am aware of that, but this is a can of worms that many people have tried to open before, and I just want to do it with the right gloves on. Alright. So, just the two of us again. Perfect. Yo, is Queen a Swans fan? I mean, I know the whole thing about this dark world is that it is inspired out of fairgrounds and roller coasters, and I know that this in particular is an off reference. But this just feels very intentional, because we all know what those kinds of birds mean. But we also have this dialogue. Ralsei further elaborating on his loneliness before Kris and Susie showing up, not knowing what to do when they did show up, and how they will react to Ralsei, or even what being Ralsei is. Damn, crippling self-deprecation, toxic need to appease others, and identity issues to add on top of all of that. My boy needed therapy yesterday. But it does make sense for him to be like this. I want you to really put yourself in his shoes for just a moment. Imagine you were just left alone in a castle for who knows how long, waiting for people to arrive, not just out of loneliness, but there's also the added stress of, being a prophesized hero, and you need to act in a certain way, because the fate of the world depends on it. Not to mention that you're just an object for people to use, and you can only value yourself off of what you can do to serve others. Of course he would be racked with issues of self-worth, being completely submissive to others' input and not setting boundaries for oneself. And there is an argument to be made that he is correct in doing so. Because, let's just remember this, Deltarune is a video game. If a video game does something you don't like, or annoys you in some way, what do? You turn it off, and play something else. Which makes sense. The purpose of a video game is to provide an enjoyable experience. If the game is not enjoyable, you don't play the video game. So Ralsei has to be the people pleaser that he is, because if he isn't, he risks causing the end of the world by you pressing escape for the final time. He has to be fluffy and cute and an adorable prince that he presents himself as, because if he doesn't, then you won't like him, and you won't want to see him anymore. So you don't play the game. He is ultimately in a situation where the survival of everyone is dependent on him being who you want him to be. That's what I think about the post-fight dialogue. The fact that he is very wanting to slip this under the rug and for us to not think about it is mainly because it's, honestly, screwed up to think about. Have you ever played a video game or watched a show or movie or read a book and everything is great, but there's just this one thing that is just very jarring to think about? This feels like an attempt at that. You are confronted with the genuine horrors of Spanton's desperation and his willingness to try to reach something that he could have never had. A man whose mind was so broken after learning the truth of the world through one phone call. And Ralsei is just trying to cover it up and ask us to not think about this, because it is fucked up. It'd also just be the fact that he's socially isolated his whole life and just does not have the capabilities of handling such a scenario like this, and he's doing his best to keep everyone going along with the game, because if he doesn't, it risks the fate of the world. Now, all that being said, when you press, "It's nice being with you," when he turns towards us, blushing, is that admiration towards the player? Or is this him keeping your attention out of desperation? Maybe it's a mix of both. This is ultimately the role of Ralsei. Whoever Ralsei is supposed to be. Hopefully in the future he'll understand that we love and appreciate him for who he is, and god damn it, this guy again. Actually, no, I'm not playing this game. You get sword. I know what you are. Anyway, we go on. Oh, but first. But alas, here we go. Gee, I wonder what Susie is doing right now. Oh cool, she got to Noelle. Gee, I wonder what Kris and Ralsei are doing right now. No, really. What are they doing? Because you probably noticed this, but we always seem to reunite with them while these two are in the middle of a conversation. Once is happenstance, twice is coincidence. But if we see this a third time, it is certainly enemy action. What are these two talking about? Oh, how I love to be the fly on the wall for that conversation. But I can't be. They specifically make sure I can't listen to their conversation. Funny, too, I can choose no, and they simply wouldn't talk about anything. So, it's specifically something that they are doing while my focus is away. We can only grasp at the possible clues and contexts of what these two are like alone. And this is where the tea comes in. Because here's the thing, we've all heard of tea theory by now, but to summarize it, is that the amount of health a specific tea heals is based on the personal feelings of two characters. Susie likes Kris, Ralsei, and Noelle. Noelle is infatuated with Susie, and while Kris has a high opinion of Susie, Ralsei and Noelle aren't up on her level. People have pointed out that this is evidence that Kris doesn't like Ralsei, or just hates him, but I don't agree with that. Noelle and Kris were childhood friends, and there's no indication that Kris hates Noelle. Plus, logically speaking, if Kris dislikes Ralsei, the tea would have given 0 HP. Hell, they would probably lose health if they drink it. Give me the onions on tea and I'll meet God the second the water touches the leaves. No, I don't think Kris hates Ralsei. Hell, Kris is down to flirt with Ralsei if prompted. So, why is Ralsei so low? Because they literally met yesterday? Kris knew Noelle and Susie for a good while to form an opinion. Ralsei is still just a dude to Kris. But Ralsei has been waiting forever for Kris and Susie, so he obviously has a high opinion of them. That opinion may have shifted after realizing how just straight up weird those two are, but he still likes Kris and Susie. And I say Kris, not the player. I mean Kris. Ralsei may still have high esteem towards the player, but he does know that Kris is their own person. That's what these conversations are for. These two to discuss matters away from our attention. As such, Ralsei is the only person so far who has truly talked to Kris. Even so, we still don't know what they talked about. Actually, I think I have a good idea. Alright, I'm gonna take a quick little pause in my half analysis, half theory crafting video, and I'm going to do a segment of full theory crafting. Because I've said this before, and I'll proudly say it again, I believe Kris is the knight. I think it's the easiest answer who the knight is, I think it has the best narrative potential, but it is ultimately a theory. One that several people don't like, apparently. A lot of people have suggested other characters as potential knight candidates, and we'll like some of what they have come up with. I still believe that Kris is the knight. Why, you ask? Well, for starters. But I guess literally opening a dark fountain in front of our eyes isn't enough proof for some of you. As such, this next portion of the video, it'll be the only time that I'll talk about Kris Knight truthism. So, if you don't want that, please skip to this point. Otherwise, enter with caution, you are not welcome here. Are they gone? I think they're gone. Alright. If you are still here, then you must also be a holy and zealous Kris Knight's believer, standing against those savage and barbaric anyone else believers. Anyway, so we all agree that Kris has been opening up the fountains. Why? Because that is Kris's knife. Queen used specifically a knife to represent the opening of the fountain. Kris is a character who is commonly associated with knives. They look up knives, click on ads with knives. And at the very start of this chapter, Toriel specifically says that that is Kris's knife in the pie tin. Kris has a motif of knives. A knife has been used to open the fountain. Kris opened the fountain. That is what they were doing, the comment of the long night. Kris sleeping through the class because they haven't gotten much sleep. And the fact that it's a point that Kris moves very slowly leads to the conclusion that Kris opened up the fountain in the night. Kris and the knight with a knife. Kris is a knight with a knife and a knight. Got it? We all agree with that, right? Okay. Now, here is the important question I need to ask. Does Ralsei know? Does Ralsei know Kris is the knight? Does he know? Because here's the thing. It can honestly go either way. If Ralsei doesn't know, then this could be a great moment of betrayal. The creator of the Dark Fountains risks the roaring each Dark World. But if he knows that Kris is the knight, that actually would explain a lot. We don't know what those two are talking about, so what if they're doing battle plans while the soul isn't paying attention? What both of them need to do, because here's the thing. The major pieces of evidence that people point to of Kris not being the knight is the fact that Ralsei suddenly senses a dark fountain right after Kris and Susie leave, and right before they walk over a few feet to the library. That timing is too specific. But, as stated before, I think Kris did it in the middle of the night. So in other words, the dark fountain was already open, and Ralsei left us, the player, to seem like we just found it. Now you may be wondering, why would Ralsei do that? Doesn't he make a great point that the roaring is awful and basically the end of the world? Even condemns Birdley for making a dark fountain in Chapter 2. Why would he be complicit with the creation of fountains? To that I have to say, I'll get to that. 'Cause this is actually one of the things that a lot of fans have noticed, and something that I hopefully wish to answer. And this is what I like to call the Roaring Paradox, which I will do in due time. So, here are the facts as we know them. Factor number 1. Kris and Ralsei spend some time alone together and have private conversations away from the player. Fact number 2. Kris does things in the middle of the night, and in one instance, opens a dark fountain right in front of us. Immediate conclusion of fact number 2. Kris opened the Chapter 2 fountain. Immediate conclusion of fact number 1. Ralsei knew that Kris was going to open the fountain, and lied when he said that he suddenly felt a dark presence. Follow-up conclusion of fact number 1. Ralsei discussed this with Kris, and provided an alibi so that Kris would not seem like they were the knight. Immediate contradiction. Kris opened the fountain right in front of us. If they wanted to make it impossible for them to be the knight, why would they do that? Counterpoint. Does us knowing that Kris is the knight actually matter? Because here's the thing, we can't communicate of what we know, and even if we did, Kris can bias that information to make it seem like an unserious claim. Follow-up conclusion of fact number 2. Kris spent a good time planning things ahead, making sure the TV was plugged in, making sure we used the bathroom sink instead of the kitchen one, making sure that there was no pie to eat so that Toriel had to make a new one with Susie, giving Kris time to slash the tires. Making sure things happen at a specific time, making sure things go in a specific way. That sounds oddly familiar to someone. There is one truth that we know above all else. The roaring is going to happen. If you know that's the direction things will go, wouldn't it be best if that road was paved by someone that you are supposed to trust? Wouldn't it be best if the hero is the one to lead that charge? Plus, I don't think the big reveal is supposed to happen yet. 'Cause we know that Kris is the knight. Others don't. Or, at least, they're not supposed to yet. So that's why he lied here. To make sure things remain on script.
Everyone's here!
Finally, the Fuck Squad is back together. Fun fact. Did you know that if you go all the way back over here, Ralsei will make a comment on Susie and Noelle, even though they couldn't have possibly seen it? I just thought that was very interesting. Anyway, we finally go back to Queen and... Oh god! Queen is controlling Bertley! How dare she use it another person and puppeteer their actions against their will and force them to harm their friends? Gee, why do I feel such a sense of guilt? Anyway, we defeat Queen, and now we're going to... Oh shit, what that? Fuck. She got away. But we catch up to her. But needing to be determined enough. It makes me wonder what the reason all of this is happening, because you need to have the will and the want to make a dark fountain. To make everyone happier? Maybe, but there can be other reasons too. But we need to defeat this tyrant first. Luckily, we've got friends to help us. This is why you make the effort of recruiting everyone. If it's not for just the simple completion, just seeing the faces pass on by and offer their support, it's enough to bring the push needed to make sure everybody is welcome. 'Cause now, we've got a queen to kill.
Round 1.
Fight!
Even after all of that, she's willing to do a cheap move like that. But luckily, Noelle is there to stand up to her. Ralsei, read the room, Ralsei. Now's not the time for this, but it does show how goal-oriented he is. We beat the boss, now let's not think about it anymore and go to the next thing. Right, guys? Guys? But that's how all the old stories go. Right? Once you beat the bad guy, all is well, and everything good now triumphs. But that's not how the real world works. Sometimes, an idea can just stick around longer than just the ending. Sometimes, people are willing to go to the dream. Queen tells us she simply didn't know what the knight actually wanted, only that she was just making assumptions. But that is over now. She stops her plans, offers a goodbye ceremony, only then to be told that she can crash at Castletown now. She walks away once this happens, leaving Ralsei alone with Noelle and Bertley as Kris and Susie exit stage right. Okay, now that we are away from them, let's talk about that moment, shall we? When Chapter 2 came out, Ralsei explained the roaring, and the first thing that happened is that, well, people asking us why didn't he tell us that before? This is absolutely an apocalyptic scenario. The literal end of the world. Why didn't he tell us the valuable information as that? He did. It's literally the first thing he tells us, actually. Or did you press no on that? But that's the thing. The legend is deliberately written like it was translated from generation to generation from many different tongues, so it could be that just Ralsei assumed that they all immediately knew the danger of it. No, that's not what I'm talking about. What I want to talk about is this. Remember at the very beginning of the game, Ralsei told us the benefits of sparing enemies? The thing about that is that there can only be enemies to spare if there are more Dark Worlds. The only way that it is possible is for the Roaring Knight to open them. Each Dark World risks a new possible roaring, and yet Ralsei is anticipating more denizens for Castletown. That is what I like to call the Roaring Paradox. Because you see, the prophecy can only be fulfilled if the roaring happens, because it is going to happen. That is the biggest Chekhov's gun of the game. The roaring is something that can happen, meaning it's going to happen. This is basic storytelling 101. If that's the case, why doesn't he let the roaring happen? Isn't that what he wants? No! Actually, let's do a little test. I want everyone to stand up and run a marathon. Right now. Right now, I say. Right now. Don't even prepare. Just do it right now. I'm not even testing you. Do it right now. Oh, you can't? That's the point. A lot of you just aren't physically capable of running that much for that long. If you are, more power to you, I guess. So, if the roaring happened now, everyone would basically be doomed because they aren't fully prepared for it. Fortunately for us, I say we got 4 or 5 chapters before it is supposed to happen. So, that's the important part. The roaring can't happen yet. That's one explanation. Now here's another one that doesn't contradict the previous one. Notice how I mentioned that there are 7 chapters, right? We meet Ralsei on chapter 1, and we continue the adventure on chapter 2. So let's say you are a character in a video game, and this video game has 7 chapters. The first chapter involves you doing a specific thing. Let's say pressing a button. That was chapter 1. Doing the thing that was needed to be done. So, if you know that there are 7 chapters, that means you're gonna have to do it again. That's a very simple logical deduction. If you didn't need to press another button, then there wouldn't need to be a chapter 2. So, the fact that you are in chapter 2 means that you know you need to press another button. This is all my assumption, but if Ralsei knew that we are playing chapter 2, He would then know that we're going to find a dark fountain, because that's how the video game is supposed to go. He's trusting the process. But he just witnessed a possible roaring event almost occur. This isn't supposed to happen yet. So he tells everyone, front and center, what would happen if we did that. We would be thrown in the meat grinder, because after each dark world, our level increases, so does our health, and other stuff too. Plus, we need to make sufficient armor to get the right healing, and get the correct equipment for them. The roaring isn't supposed to happen yet, both narratively speaking and gameplay-wise. So, he told them what would happen. But that's the thing. They now know to open a dark world. If they wanted to, or at least get desperate enough, either one of them could open up a dark world and risk a premature roaring, and the game is absolutely capable of diverging from its path, as previously shown. But, if this was all a dream, then they could just think it was impossible. And Susie told Noelle that this was all a dream. And Ralsei has at least tangential knowledge of what those two did. And this is a long adventure. Burley is tired of being controlled by Queen, and Noelle is mentally exhausted, and Ralsei knows how to pacify and put Lightners to sleep. Has now been left alone with both of them. So why doesn't he just tie up loose ends? What? Am I saying he would manipulate others into forgetting their entire adventure? Of course not. I'm just saying that Ralsei would, want to protect a premature roaring scenario. Those are definitely not the same things. Besides, he has already had enough to deal with. I say let him have a little dubious morality as a treat. It's for the greater good, after all. But, yeah, Castletown has expanded, Queen has joined the court, more Darkners offering their skills and talents and inputs to the Castletown. This makes it better for the future. And that's about it. I think I talked about every major moment of Chapter 2, or at least one that referenced Ralsei. Yes, that's all. I finished the recap section of my video. It's all done. I did everything I was required to do. Now all I need to do is proceed with the final thoughts. Proceed with wrapping up the analysis. All I need to do is proceed. Hey, wait a minute! This game is broken. Things were supposed to happen, but didn't. Not only did a character fundamentally change in a way that they can never go back from, but a character is now dead. One of the blue beads has now broken away from its track. The game has now forever deviated from its intended course. We knew the game was supposed to go a certain way, but then the input of one character has chosen a different path. But all in all, they could have still ended up in the same destination. Now, I don't think there's any way of coming back from this. With a few carefully chosen actions, choosing the wrong one can abort the route entirely, but if you make these choices, you can manipulate a poor girl into murdering her best friend. Something has gone fundamentally wrong. What do you do when it becomes clear that things can't continue as they are any longer? What do you do when you know things need to be reined in? Do you call it quits and just throw in the towel? Or do you proceed to the best of your ability? I'm asking this not just because I want an answer, but because I wrote this spark 3 times now, and this is currently the 2nd time I'm dubbing this. Turns out final thoughts are harder to write if you keep thinking about things, especially when we're talking about a game that is only 2/7 complete. We're trying to reach the buried treasure when we only have the directions to a Wendy's. But we will reach that destination. I'm just trying to enjoy the journey as best I can. Theory crafting is incredibly fun, but we only got so much information to work with. So, with the little information that we have, let's put the pieces together and at least attempt an answer. Ralsei knows of a prophecy of the Roaring. He knows that he is the predestined hero to save the world, and he fully intends to fulfill that purpose. Ralsei knows that he is in a video game. He knows that he is the cute, lovable, adorable mascot that will sell lots of marketable plushies. And he intends to fulfill that purpose. Who told him that? Who told Ralsei about the prophecy? Who told him that he is in a video game? Because no one could have. He was alone in Castletown. The reason the dummy looks like him is because he has literally nobody else to base it off of. Up until we entered the storage closet, he was alone. I can accept that darkners have intrinsic knowledge about the world, knowing where the classroom is, knowing where the computer lab is. Queen, however, doesn't know that we are playing a video game. King doesn't know either. Yet, Ralsei does. Like Jevil and Spamton, that was something that was told to them by a strange someone. I think we all know who told him. We know nothing about Gaster. The very few things that we know about him are just buried with layers of cryptic existence, possible chances, and the weirdest game mechanics. But once we do have a sliver of something that can be considered him, suddenly, and without warning, it has a habit of disappearing, as if it was never even there. I'm going to make the assumption that the person speaking in the Garner segment, the person speaking in the save files, and the person in the game over screen is Gaster. If this is true, then he just exists outside of the game, with the code and the assets. So what's stopping him from meddling even further? He can meet Jevel, call Spampton, but Ralsei is alone, and he needs to be the Lonely Prince. But that doesn't necessarily stop him. He can just make himself disappear, forgotten, but still leave an impact. What's stopping him from just injecting that information into Ralsei's mind, rewriting the code to make someone act in a very specific way? That's how I think he knows. Just another victim, but maybe this experiment was a success. But why? I feel like all of this effort to cover the tracks only make things even more suspicious. Only make things stick out even more. Only make him harder to put our trust in him. What if that's the point? I've talked about this before, and I'm not the only one to point out all of the religious motifs. Banishing the angel's heaven, Noelle's angelic connections, Kris's demonic connections, and hell's bubbles roaring from the depths. Angels, heaven, churches, light, darkness, depths, hell, demons. So, let's extend that motif to Ralsei. Ralsei is devoted to Lightners to a religious degree. He sees us as a god to him. This is very much a metaphor for religious fundamentalism and, perhaps as I stated before, indoctrination. But there is another metaphor, one that fits our fluffy little goat boy a little more. Ralsei is a scapegoat. To summarize, there used to be a practice of taking a living goat, and onto that goat would be the confessions, transgressions, and sins. Then that goat would be led into the forest, carrying all of those sins and burdens with it. To simplify, the scapegoat is the pre-designated guilty party, the one that will take the blame for when everything goes wrong. Everybody else will be free of sin, because only one person will be the designated sinner. Now, tell me, when everything is said and done, when the newest chapter comes out, when something bad goes wrong and everything goes to shit, who will be the person that everybody will blame? Who will be the person people point to? I ask this because we only got two answers. We can blame all of this as the machinations of Gaster, or the Mystery Man, or him. But can we? Because how can we point to someone that isn't there? Who was never there to begin with? We don't have a canonical face to associate with him. We only have text. So we go to the next best thing. Someone who does have a face that we can call a liar. Someone who we can call a friend that betrayed us. Someone to bear the weight of all the guilt. Because it's going to be Ralsei. There's already people who say that he's a cruel, manipulative mastermind behind everything. People will say that he is a cold, heartless, uncaring demon. People who will say that he is pure evil. Even if they don't go as far to say that, there are other ways to blame him that doesn't go so far as to say that he is literally the devil. You can point to an instance and have him be interpreted in the way that is less than flattering. Hell, I've done this in this video. It's easy to justify those interpretations. It's easy to blame Ralsei. Maybe that is his real purpose. To be blamed. And you know what the worst part is? I think he knows. I think by the end of this, he knows that he will be the one people will call a villain, because if everyone else is free of the burdens of sin, maybe they will be happy to blame him. Everyone else is innocent if he is the only sinner. Because that's how the world works, right? It's easy to fall into black and white morality. It's very easy to fall into us versus them mentality. It's easy to always assume the worst. But that's just it. It's easy. The world isn't light or dark. It's a balance. Things are more complicated than that. But it's still hard to break away from that mindset. It takes a lot of time, a lot of mental reprogramming, and needs a lot of support. But hopefully there are friends to help. Friends who will pull you away from the road that you think is the only one for you. Friends who will change how everything is for something that is fundamentally better. Damn, Gaster really found a lonely gay wizard and decided to give him a religious guilt. But that's my conclusion of what I think about Ralsei. At least, the conclusion that can be made with what little information we have so far. Thank you all for watching. I really put in a lot of effort into this, and I wanted to make it as entertaining as possible. You might not even agree with me, to be honest, and that's fine. You all have your own interpretation and theories. I'm just offering opinions and perspective of what I think is, well, honestly, the funniest way of interpreting Ralsei. The man's literally just a minimum wage worker trying to do his goddamn job. But thank you all, once again. And I know it sounds corny for me to say this, but, like and subscribe and hit the bell, please? I think I've earned it at this point. This is my most ambitious video so far, and honestly, I learned a lot of things about Blender while making it. Oh yeah, just in case you didn't know, I use fucking Blender to edit my videos. It actually has a dedicated video editing software in it, and the whole shebang is free, so you can just hop in at any time. But I will take this experience to heart when I work on other videos, since I do want to make things that aren't Deltarune related. I've made several videos about Deltarune so far, and I kind of just want to make something else just to clear my palette. That being said, do y'all like vampires?